Hello again, and welcome back to Bigfoot Lake. Appreciate you stopping by tonight, as tonight we have 3 encounters to share. These encounters range from the state of Connecticut, second one goes to the state of Colorado, and then finally we find ourselves in upstate New York. So I hope you enjoy these encounters. If you do, don't forget to smash that thumbs up. And with that said, let's dive into our first encounter from the state of Connecticut. Our first encounter begins in Windham County, Connecticut, on the old Providence-Worcester rail line. It's now a riding and biking trail, and this was Labor Day weekend of 1997. I was riding my geriatric quarter horse mare on a trail about 5 miles from where I live. It was a very warm day, and since there was a clean stream off the trail, I decided to let her drink and splash around a bit. I was watching some little fish in the stream when I noticed a footprint on the bank. My first reaction was, who is walking barefoot around here? Then the size hit me. Huge. Nearly twice as big as my size 8 riding boot. That really made me nervous. At the same time, my horse, who was absolutely bomb-proof, started getting antsy. She was an angel, and anyone could ride her. I adored her, and to this day, I miss her. She was my first horse, but not my last. Now I have a Morgan and board an Arabian mare, but that's another story. At this point, I thought, okay, time to go. I don't want to meet the person with the size 20 shoes who was running around these woods barefoot. Just as I turned my horse back to the trail, the smell hit me. It was foul and skunk-like, with an overtone of wet dog and burned garlic. I actually gagged. It was so bad. At this point, my horse was on the verge of bolting. Mind you, this was a 20-year-old mare with severe navicular disease and arthritis. She took off like she was shot out of a cannon. Right then, all hell broke loose. There was a hill on my right, and this thing came down the hill. It sounded for all the world like a bull elephant in full charge. Trees were breaking. It was screaming, and I could hear it running. The screams reverberated in my chest and hurt my ears. I rounded a corner on the trail with my horse in full bolt, and me hanging on for dear life. Literally. And finally saw what was chasing me. It was very tall, dark hair, incredibly fast, and it looked like a cross between a man and a gorilla. Maybe 400 to 500 pounds. I was terrified. It paralleled me for about 50 yards and then veered off back towards the hill, continuing to scream at me for another 10 minutes. I didn't stop till I found the highway and home. I have been mugged and was not as scared as I was that day. This is why I became a Bigfoot researcher and learned about these very interesting creatures. Looking back, I realized he was probably just bluffing, like gorillas bluff. But back in 1997, I thought I was dead. My horse never really recovered, and she died a short while later. I've been back to the spot twice, and there are territorial markers everywhere. And occasionally, I get the being watched feeling when I go into that area. I've had trouble with something spooking my horses at night, and chickens have regularly disappeared from a locked hen house. Is it Bigfoot? Who knows? I hear something wailing at night in the spring. So, maybe we do have a viable breeding population of Bigfoot in the northeast. And that's from Thompson, Connecticut. So what do you guys think about that story? I'm always fascinated when I hear stories of not just encounters with Bigfoot, but it's very interesting to see other animals and their reaction to these encounters. You know, she described her horse as being very calm, and I think she used the word bomb-proof. You know, wouldn't spook easily at all. But things certainly changed during this encounter as her horse bolted and took off. So what do you guys think? Have you heard other stories where a horse or an animal reacts like this, completely out of character, perhaps terrified, just trying to get away from whatever this thing was? Yeah, I'd like to get you guys' thoughts on that. And also, what do you guys think about how she described this as possibly a bluff charge? I've seen those a lot with gorillas. They'll take those few aggressive steps towards somebody and then stop. Do you think this is a possibility? I'd like to hear your thoughts on that also. So yeah, that was a encounter from the state of Connecticut. So thought maybe you guys would enjoy that one. So let me know if you guys like that one. And with that being said, let's move on to our second encounter of the night. For our second encounter, we move to the state of Colorado. This is in Route National Forest, the Walton Creek Campgrounds. And this report goes all the way back to October of 1970. It says it was approximately 4:30 p.m. The weather was good. There was a little bit of cloud cover. The light was good and visibility was good. After an unsuccessful day elk hunting, trekking many miles around the heavy timbered area near the Rabbit Ears Pass region, my Uncle Bill, Cousin Charles, and myself decided to call it a day and head back to our camp in the Walton Creek campgrounds. About 4 miles south of our camp, as we were talking softly together, a loud crashing noise behind us came to our attention. My uncle, an experienced hunter and woodsman of many years, replied that it sounded like we had spooked a large bull elk. Having accustomed ourselves to the area over the last few days, we knew that a deep canyon running through that location, about 300 yards in the direction the animal was moving, would slow it down. Thinking that we could possibly get a fair shot as it crossed this canyon below us, the three of us started in pursuit. The animal was obviously spooked and running, as the sounds of its progress through the dense aspen trees and pine trees ahead were very easy to hear. After an exhausting chase through the heavy timber, the three of us broke out upon the canyon's edge, expecting to see the quote-unquote bull elk crossing the canyon bottom below us. The canyon runs in a southwesterly direction. It's dry-bottomed and is sparsely treed due to its steep sides. It is approximately 100 yards deep, narrow-sided, approximately 50 yards across the bottoms, with heavy foliage of brush about 3 to 4 feet high. Trying to catch our breath, we were amazed that no elk was in sight below us running across the bottoms. After a few seconds, I was alerted to the sound of rolling rocks across the canyon from me. As I looked up horizontally and directly across the canyon from me, I spotted what I believed at first to be a very large black bear running up the steep-sided canyon opposite where we were. The distance was approximately 200 yards. Startled, I called out and raised my rifle to view the animal through my rifle scope. I lost several seconds locating the animal in my scope and was stunned. The creature was running up the steep hill on 2 feet. It was covered completely with what appeared to be matted, shaggy, coarse, black hair. The full back, shoulders, buttocks, and legs were turned towards me. The back of the head appeared to be hunched slightly forward. The back of the head was a rounded skull. Through the scope, I did not see arms or hands, as they were directly in front of the creature and blocked my view by its body. In hindsight, I believe the creature was using brush and limbs in its path to help pull itself up the incline. It only took seconds for the creature to reach the top of the opposite canyon, and without pausing, it disappeared through the trees. After a moment of startled silence, the 3 of us compared notes about what we saw and what to do. In any case, it was too close in resemblance to a human to shoot it. However, we were excited about seeing a creature that none of us had ever seen before and decided to backtrack it towards our camp. The creature's trail was very easy to find due to torn brush and tree limbs in its passage. We followed it for about 3 miles to where it emerged out of the forest, crossing U.S. Highway 40, where it continued back into the forest on the other side. Due to the lateness of the day and exhaustion, we abandoned the trail and returned via the highway back to camp. It was apparent that we had startled the animal about 350 yards north of the canyon, where he had skirted a wide patch of brush. We had passed within a few yards from this creature, as our own tracks were clearly visible. After examining the area closely the following day, it became obvious that the animal had been taking its time wandering around through the thick foraging for service berries, acorns, and from the scrub oak and wild currants. We believe the animal became aware of us and had lain down in the brush, waiting for us to pass. All along the creature's path from this thicket to the canyon, brush and large tree branches had been disrupted by a great deal of mass and force. Judging from 3 to 4 inch thick tree limbs, 7 to 8 feet above the ground, the creature stood approximately 7.5 to 8 feet tall, which coincided with our judgment at the time of the sighting. In several washout areas, the creature had left a few clear enough scattered tracks for us to get measurement. For the most part, the animal appeared to have traveled in a wandering action, leaving tracks of 15 3/4 inches. From one impression, it was discovered that the creature was missing the little toe from its left foot. It was judged by my uncle, an experienced game tracker of 40 years, that the creature had weighted upwards of 350 pounds. The following day, a report was made to the Colorado State and Game Officer, checking hunters in the area for license and game kills. The officer seemed skeptical at most and unwilling to check out the physical evidence. In his opinion, it was only a bear and possibly a combination of hunting nerves. He also warned us about the use of alcohol while accompanied by firearms. We were offended by the way the report was received and by the accompanied remarks. So that encounter was from the state of Colorado. So what do you think about that one? It says once they saw this creature on the other side of that canyon, he pulled up his scope approximately 200 yards. And that's really not that far looking through a rifle scope. You would have seen a lot of detail. You would have gotten a pretty good look at this thing. And I can just picture it quickly scaling that other side of the canyon, grabbing the trees and the branches ahead of it just to help it pull itself up, popped right up the other side and gone like that. It was much further along than what they expected to see if it would have been that quote-unquote bull elk that they thought it was. So yeah, let me know what you think of that one. While we didn't get a detailed view of the face, we got a lot of other details, including a missing little toe. So I thought that was a lot of detail there. So let me know what you think of that one from the state of Colorado. And if you're familiar with that area, the Route National Forest, Walton Creek Campgrounds, 4 miles southwest of Walton Creek Gore Mountain Range. If you're familiar with that area, yeah, let me know. Let me know what that area looks like out there. I'd be interested to hear and be grateful to see your comment or hear from you. So that concludes our second encounter of the night. So let's take some time and dive into our third and final encounter. And for this one, we move to upstate New York. You know, a lot of times when people hear those words, New York, they think of that big city to the south. And yet much of upstate New York is absolutely remote, beautiful wilderness. You have the Adirondacks, which is over 6 million acres of forest, lakes, rivers, much of which is extremely remote. So, okay, this report dates back to autumn of 1994. And the person who submitted this report, they prefaced it with a couple questions. And maybe we can help answer this. The questions say aggressive behavior with a question mark, or is it just a game to them with a question mark? So maybe you guys could share your thoughts on whether you think this is aggressive behavior or just a game. So this is from the Chautauqua National Forest, New York, Seneca Nation property. It was late September that I was visiting friends who lived at the edge of the Chautauqua National Forest. Chautauqua National Forest is probably not listed on the New York Forest Registry because it's technically on Seneca Nation reservation property. Locate Jamestown, New York on the map, or Lilydale. It would be the forests that bordered this property going to the north. It's about an hour south of Buffalo. My friend and I had gotten up to hike one of the nature trails that go throughout the park. This was early in the morning. This part of western New York is about an hour south of Buffalo and in between the Seneca Nation. The tourist season of the summer had ended, and it was not yet deer hunting season, but the foliage was still thick. My friend and I started on the trail early, around 6:30 in the morning. It was still dusk outside and the sun was just beginning to rise. After about 20 minutes into our hike, we had come to what looked like a marsh-like environment with fallen trees and some open spaces. We had stopped to survey the area, just looking around at how beautiful the scenery was. I would like to say at this point that my friend, who is also a professional photographer, wished he had brought his camera. And in a few moments, I wished he had as well. As we stood there, we got the strange sense that we were being watched. I thought this strange considering the remoteness of the area and how early it was. I turned around to see what was behind us. We heard movement in the bushes. At this point, I thought it was a bear. Bigfoot had not entered my mind at all. We both began to make a lot of noise and talking loud enough so that if it was a bear, it would run off instead of charging. After a while, we realized that it was not a bear or any other animal because with all the noise we were making, whatever was in the thickets, had not moved. At this point, we thought it had to be a human, but as we neared the thickets about 50 feet from where we were standing, we heard a heavy breathing and saw through the thicket what appeared to be a large, dark form, either laying down or squatting. My friend became frightened, and even at this point, Bigfoot had not entered either of our minds. My friend urged me to continue down the original trail and back to where we had started. We were already deep into the woods and had at least another good 20 minutes of brisk walking or running if whatever was in the bushes decided to follow us. As we started down the trail, whatever was in the bushes darted behind the nearest tree and began to follow us. After a few minutes of this, it became aggravating. So my friend and I thought we would stop and hide behind the nearest tree we could find to see what this thing would do. As I peered out from behind the side of this tree, what I saw is something I will never forget. When I stared at the tree and bushes that this thing was hiding behind, I will not say not hiding well, at what appeared to be the 6-foot level of a branch was a dark, hairy shoulder and part of a massive forearm. At this point, I knew exactly what I was looking at. It was a 7-foot tall Sasquatch, and with all of my nerve, I tried to get my friend to see from my angle. When my friend moved over to my side to get a look, this creature moved just enough to see its torso, and that was all my friend needed to see, and he took off. I was left standing there, wondering if the reports of these things chasing people were true, but all it did was stand there, waiting for me to make my move. This was the point I was scared the most. I did not know what to do, so I began to talk to it out loud and said, "We're not here to hurt you, we're just moving through." I said this in a calming voice, despite the fact that my nerves were as frayed as they could be. I started down the trail in a calm walking gait, and this Sasquatch kept right up with me, about 75 feet behind me, always just staying out of my line of view. It stopped following me about a half mile from the end of the trail. When I caught up with my friend, he was too shaken up to talk about it and has never mentioned it again. I have been back to the area since this incident, and my friend will not go into the woods by himself, and only with a great number of people. I would like to add that there was no smell associated with this sighting, and no vocalization, only heavy breathing and what sounded like a low guttural sound, and some form of what sounded to be almost like a lip smacking. Several months later, I had read in Jamestown, New York, that there had been a sighting of a white Bigfoot that chased a group of kids off a bike path not far from where I had my sighting. So that's the conclusion of our third and final story of tonight. What do you guys think of that one? And before we back up and look at that story, the person who submitted this mentioned another sighting of a white Bigfoot that chased a group of kids near Jamestown, New York. Have you guys heard of that encounter? Or is anybody near this area? Love to hear your thoughts on this area or any strange things that you may have seen in this area. Just reach out or leave a comment. Love to hear from you all. So the part that really fascinated me about this was when his friend, and I put that in quotes, took off. He says, I was left there standing by myself, wondering if the reports of these things chasing people were true. Can you picture yourself in that situation? You're in the forest or this marsh area with your good friend, and this creature appears, and your friend bails on you. I think I may have to question that friendship. I don't know. What do you guys think about that? So yeah, that was a encounter from upstate New York, and that was from the Seneca Nation Reservation property. So what do you guys think? Sound like a Bigfoot to you? Sounds like one to me. So of the 3 stories tonight, let me know which one was your favorite encounter. And we call these stories a lot, but I think encounter is the correct word, because like has been pointed out, I think the word story, that kind of leads towards something that's possibly being made up. I think encounter is a much better word, so we'll go with that. So yeah, let me know which of the 3 encounters that perhaps resonated most with you. So I appreciate any thoughts you guys have. If you enjoyed the 3 encounters of tonight, please hit that thumbs up. I would appreciate that very much. I appreciate you stopping by again to us here at Bigfoot Lake. We always enjoy your company here. So we hope you have a great night. And as always, we'll see you on the next one.